welcome or welcome back to the Madness and Meetings podcast. My name is Kelly, and today's episode is going to be a little bit of a personal one, a little bit of a self-exposing solo episode where I would really love to just share and maybe do a little bit of real-time processing with you of the learnings that I've had thus far in my life, utilizing what I think is the most potent and at times painful therapy that life has to offer us, while it also is the most exquisite and powerful therapy if it's used in a conscious and intentional way. Um, it helps us to really uncover a lot of our unconscious patterns. It helps us detach from unhealthy attachment patterns. It it really helps us to understand what limiting stories we are holding on to and projecting outward about ourselves and about life. And that therapy is relationships. Relationships and connection. And I am certainly no self-proclaimed relationship expert, trust me, although I would love to be. And for those of you who have been tuned into our episodes for a while, you may or may not know that I am planning on going back to study psychology, and I would really love to expand my expertise around relationships and can even imagine myself being a relationship therapist at some point in the future, because this realm of life has been my biggest teacher. And it's really only been a vehicle that I've used for my own personal development and healing for the past few years. I'm going to get a little bit more into that about where I was prior to those 3 years, because I think that contrast is pretty funny and maybe relatable to you, depending on where you're at with these things. But I find it so fascinating how this one area of life has held up so, so, so many mirrors for me to see my blind spots, to understand the impact of my earlier life experiences that I was either completely unconscious to, or I kind of just compartmentalized and didn't understand that it had any impact on who I was, when in fact it had every impact on who I was. And that's the thing about being in relationships. And I don't even necessarily, maybe I should have given this caveat at the beginning, it doesn't even have to be necessarily romantic relationships, although obviously those relationships are very potent and the dynamic of them are very awakening and triggering, because those types of relationships are eventually become people that we spend a lot of our time with and get very, very intimate with in ways that we don't with other relationship types. And so I want this to be kind of general as far as like using our relations with other people in our lives for our awakening, for our personal growth, for our healing, for our integration and our expansion into the best version of ourselves. Because I think literally every single person that we come into contact with is an opportunity to go deeper into your own work. Like every single person, even just like the person walking down the street, can end up being that for you if you are open to it and if you are living your life in a very conscious way and you are actively seeking for those opportunities to understand what life is trying to mirror to you about you. And I think one place where we have the most obvious, well, sometimes obvious, sometimes not, but definitely the most powerful opportunities to do that kind of work is with our romantic partners. And for me, just so you guys know, I'm 27, And I would say like around age 23, 24, 25, I really thought that I was good in the relationship department. Like, let me just paint the picture for you of like what mindset I had at that point in my life. I was very much so comparing where I was at and how I interacted inside of relationships to that typical persona that we see represented as like this is not a healthy way of being in relationships, which is, I would say, very much the archetype of like the anxious attachment person. So I was comparing myself to this very well talked about persona of like someone who really struggles to be alone, somebody who is really insecure inside of their relationships and is jealous and is always afraid of being abandoned and afraid that their partner is going to leave them and all of that. And through me comparing my direct experience of my relationships to that, I saw that there was a major contrast in how I was directly experiencing my relationships. Because to me, my relationships up until that point in my life had been very much like, oh, whatever, they can be with me or they cannot be with me, and like it doesn't matter because like I'm okay with myself, and like I love spending most of my time alone anyways, and I'm not just going to give that up for anybody, and like if someone is not going to be, you know, the right person for me or isn't going to treat me right or is not going to be faithful to me or whatever, then like screw that person, like I don't need them in my life type of thing, which in a lot of ways can come across as healthy, and there's definitely healthy attributes to that as far as like learning how to be okay in your own company and feel secure with yourself and not need a partner, a romantic partner, in order to be okay with yourself to the point where it gets you to then settle for romantic partners that aren't actually healthy for you because you're operating under this belief system that being with someone that's hurtful to you is still better than being alone. And I think that's that extreme version of that way of thinking and that way of be operating inside of relationships was so extremely opposite to what I was experiencing that I was like, I'm good. Like I'm fine. Like I can be single for the rest of my life and be fine. And therefore, like I don't have anything to work on in relationship. And man, has life humbled me. Man, oh man, oh man, have I been brutally humbled in my mid to later years of my 20s up until this point, um, where I have been beautifully and wonderfully and synchronistically placed inside of relationship dynamics that have forced me to confront the aspects of myself that were feeding into this relationship dynamic that on the surface seemed healthy and secure and good, but was actually coming from an extremely damaged and fearful and unintegrated and traumatized place inside of me. And there were so many lessons that I had that kind of like fed little breadcrumbs to me throughout the last few years that brought me to this um, very recent understanding that like my attachment wounds, if you're familiar with attachment theory, I always like to context things around that because I find it so brilliant and so easy to understand. And so, if you're into that stuff, I'm very, very, very much in the fearful avoidant category there, where my outward persona and the way that I was kind of like interacting in the world and my relationships was from this very avoidant place where it was like, I don't need anybody. Like, when things got hard in relationships, it was like, "Okay, like, I'm out, this isn't worth it," type of thing, or maybe I would work on it for a bit, but then it was like, "Oh, no, like, this isn't worth it," and, like, was really good at convincing myself that the person that I was relating to was the problem, and that the relationship just wasn't going to work, it was doomed, it was fatally flawed, and then getting also really, really skilled at finding reasons to justify this. So looking for qualities in the other person that would justify to me that the relationship was not gonna work or they weren't the person that I wanted them to be, etcetera, etcetera. And I just wanna add that if any of this is resonating with you, where you find yourself in experiences where you might end up, like, really, really liking a person for a while, but then as time goes on, like, you start to get really hypercritical of them, and maybe you start to give yourself the ick, or maybe you just seem to discover more and more and more flaws or qualities in them that you can very easily justify as unacceptable. To me, I have come to the conclusion that when I'm looking for that evidence, I'm gonna find it, like 100% of the time, and it's not because the evidence is really valuable or that it is actually something that is as extreme as I wanna believe it is to the point where it's, like, justifiable for leaving that relationship or becoming closed off to that person or whatever whatever I'm using as an excuse to change how I'm relating to that person. To me, looking for other people's flaws and really hamming up qualities in them and justifying them as inexcusable and unacceptable was essentially my way of justifying pushing them away before they got the chance to do it to me. Ooh, right? Like, plot twist. She's the drama. I am the drama. I am 100% the drama. And in reflection, I can see so many relationship dynamics where this was the case. Friendships, too. I have absolutely done this in some of my earlier friendships in my teenage years, in my early 20s, where it was like really, 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 really close, really, 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 really fast, like really close friends, or like head over heels in love with this new partner, or whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, my mind starts finding things in them that I don't like. And then, like, using that to over time, like, put walls up to create distance between me and that person until we kind of just are so disconnected that the relationship inevitably just disintegrates. And that is 100% a protective mechanism that I was unconscious to. Like, when I tell you that I was unconscious to it, I mean I was in full, complete belief that the reason why the relationship was falling apart is because these qualities in this person made it impossible to be in a relationship with them, and had no ability to take personal responsibility for the fact that I was pulling away or that I was hamming up qualities in them that actually weren't that big of a deal at all in the grand scheme of things. I was not at the awareness level or the consciousness level to be able to slow down and pick up on that experience and be able to investigate it until I got to my, like, mid-20s, which was kind of where things in my relationship dynamic started to change, and certain patterns that had played out became a lot more obvious and a lot more dramatic to the point where I couldn't really ignore them anymore. Like, for example, I had this one pattern in romantic relationships for like my late teenage years into my early 20s, where I kept getting into relationships with partners that I didn't like. Like, I would I would always feel like I didn't actually see a future with this person or didn't ever actually feel attracted to this person anyway, but for some reason would still end up in relationship with them and then end up in relationship with them for a very long time. And it ended up being this dynamic where it was like this person really liked me and was really like trying to make things work with me, but I was really like closed off and disconnected and not being my best self, to be honest. And I look back on those times and try to have compassion for that younger version of me that was completely oblivious to why she was, interacting inside of these relationships and creating these kind of dynamics inside of her relationships where she kind of held all the power and was the one in control, the one holding all the cards, essentially, because I now recognize through life therapy and real therapy and a whole lot of self-reflection that I got into relationships where the other person liked me way more than I liked them because it made me feel safe. Because if they felt like I was too good for them, they would never leave. And I would never be rejected. I would never be abandoned. And so it was this control dynamic that I was quite unconsciously using to create a sense of stability inside of my life because I had a lot of earlier life experiences like childhood, early developmental years where I felt very lonely. And I felt like I didn't belong, and I felt like I was constantly rejected and constantly not good enough. And my rebellion to that was to then only involve myself in relationship dynamics where that wouldn't be the case, where someone wouldn't want to leave. Um, but it was interesting to be experiencing that relationship pattern with this awareness level of like, but like, I don't care about being in a relationship. And like, I love my own company and I don't care about like if someone wants to leave, like they can leave, then that's not my person. Like, I don't care. Like, I really was convinced that I had no insecurities inside of relationships, that I didn't care if someone broke up with me. Um, but it's easy to say that when you know that no one's ever going to break up with you because you're never going to be in a relationship with someone that would ever want to break up with you. Like that was kind of, this sounds crazy, but that was kind of the place that I was in. That was the controlling dynamic that I was finding myself in over and over and over and over again. And to then have come to this conclusion that it was this dynamic that I was unconsciously creating inside of my life to avoid the pain of abandonment and rejection that started to get my wheels turning around this idea that I actually have a very deep fear of abandonment and rejection, which was really hard to process for a while because I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I don't care. I want to be alone. I want to spend all of my time alone. I'm not afraid of someone abandoning me or leaving me or being alone. I love being alone. I'm not afraid of being alone. I love being alone. I think I might have mentioned this in other episodes where there was this weird thing that happened between my dad and I constantly. And I think about it to this day because it was such an obvious mirror. Again, every person in our life is our mirror. And it's always giving us opportunities to wake up to a part of ourselves that we are unconscious to. And my dad served as a wonderful mirror, even though it took me years after this to recognize what role he was playing here. Um, but there was this point in my early 20s where I didn't really have much of a life. I didn't really have many friends. I wasn't really dating anyone. And I was spending a lot of my free time alone, reading self-help books, meditating, pulling tarot cards, like watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, going for super long walks, that kind of stuff. If I wasn't working, I was doing all of that by myself, essentially. And whenever my dad would come over to like catch up and whatever, he'd ask me what I've been up to, and I would tell him. Every time, without fault, every single time, and it got to the point where I started to, like I could feel my body tensing, waiting for him to respond to this because it felt like I was, like, having to bottle up so much rage to not, like, attack him for saying this because it made me so irrationally angry. Every time he would say, "Aw, you must be so lonely." So innocent, so sweet, really, like, just a dad expressing concern for his daughter who is telling him that she is spending all of her time reading books and going for walks by herself, like, I would be concerned too if my daughter or kid said that, but the way that my body could not handle that, my brain went absolutely haywire every time. It was so hard not to just blow up at him. I think the extent to which I would respond would be like, "No? What do you no, I'm not lonely. I love being alone. I don't even know what it's like to be lonely. I literally don't know what it feels like to be lonely. I've never felt lonely in my life. I love spending my time. I would rather be spending my time alone." Like, I would just go on these huge, intense rants, and then my dad would kinda just be like, "All right, so, and then change the subject, and then, that conversation would end, and I would just, like, be carrying around this bottle of rage for the next, like, 2 hours, replaying that conversation in my head over and over, and then it would happen again next time I saw him. So it was, like, this weird repeating pattern where I could not resonate at all with the idea that I was lonely, and it was so fascinating to come to this realization that there was this part of me that was unconsciously creating relationship dynamics where I always felt like the one in control so that I never got rejected, so that I never got abandoned because I was afraid of that. Like there was like a very stark contrast between these two versions of myself or two parts of me that didn't really feel like they made sense together. It's like on the one hand, I want to spend all my time alone. I don't need no man. I don't need anybody. Like, I love being by myself. I don't even know what it's like to be lonely. But also, like, I am so deeply terrified of being alone and rejected and abandoned that I constantly attract people into my life that are obsessed with me and then get them to like me way more than I like them so that I hold all the cards so that I never have to feel afraid that they're going to leave. Like, it was such a weird realization to wake up to that took me many, many more years to fully I mean, I'm not even fully processed it at this point, let's be real, but since coming to that realization, I have started to experience different relationship dynamics that started to bring even more of this to light. And again, here's an episode. I'm fully exposing myself. Here we go. Um, one of my most recent relationships was the absolute largest teacher for me in regards to this, where within the length of the relationship, I got to experience both parts of me so intensely. So I got to experience the version of myself that I was more familiar with, where it was like, I was hypercritical of that person. I kind of didn't feel like they were right for me or that they were enough for me in these certain ways and knew that they really liked me and like they like thought the world of me, but like I just like I was just kind of going along with it, but also like not really sure and didn't really think that I saw anything of it, but just kind of like being inside of it anyways. And like being really aware of it happening for the first time, like this was the first time I had experienced the same relationship pattern after having a lot of this new awareness that this was a pattern I had undergone in my life and created in my life to try to avoid the pain of rejection and abandonment. So like imagine yourself having the awareness that like I only date people that like me more than I like them so that they don't reject me and abandon me, and then getting into a relationship where that is exactly what you feel is happening again, and you're like, "Oh, here I am. Um, what do I do? What am I supposed to do?" And to be honest, I had no idea. I was so confused. I was very wishy-washy. I flip-flopped a lot between, no, I shouldn't do this. Like, I need to end this now, to like, oh, but like maybe this person is like meant to be in my life right now. And it was like, I feel really bad. And I know that I was causing some damage in this person's life experience. Um, because I was very wishy-washy and very confused and hot and cold with my experience. But it was because I was flip-flopping so dramatically between my conscious and my unconscious, where my conscious said, like, um, I don't think I want this. Like, I don't really think I see a future with this person. This isn't the type of person I would normally see myself being with. But consciously, I would flip to like, but I want to be around this person. This person feels really comfortable. This person feels safe. This person, um, if there's something about this person that makes me want to, you know, continue seeing where this goes. And so it was like so weird to like watch myself flip back and forth between that experience. And it was familiar because it had been every other relationship that I had been in up until that point, but I had been experiencing it for the first time, like I said, with that level of self-awareness, which made it way harder, to be honest. Like, imagine watching yourself go through something that you now see is really toxic and knowing exactly why you're doing it, but doing it anyways. That is a part of our human experience, isn't it? We all have resonance with that experience, and it is really shit. It's really wild shit. And so that was part of the relationship that I was familiar with. And then at a certain point in the relationship, it flipped completely on its head. I'm talking 180 to an experience of relationship that I was completely unfamiliar with. And that took me on a fucking ride, let me tell you. And it was the experience that I had always looked down on. It was this experience of relationship where when I heard other people relating to their partners in this way, I'd be like, "Oh, girl, sis, like you need therapy. Like you sis, like you should probably be alone for a while. Like this isn't healthy." And it was that experience of being so insecure, like so deeply, deeply terrified of being rejected and being abandoned that it drove me crazy. And like I experienced that extreme dynamic where like I constantly felt on edge that I wasn't enough, that this person didn't like me, that there was something that he was going to see in me or something that he was seeing in me that was changing his feelings towards me, and he was starting to fall out of love with me, and he was going to leave me, and he was questioning his feelings for me and blah blah. Like it was like constantly feeling like if I breathed wrong, the worst thing ever was going to happen. I was going to be abandoned and rejected. And like actually feeling like that would be the worst thing in the world, like keeping me up at night, making me throw up, that kind of anxious. Like it was wild. And I was experiencing that extreme version of that type of relationship dynamic with the exact same person that I had previously experienced the complete opposite extreme relationship dynamic with, where I was like, "Oh, I don't know about you," and blah, blah, blah. And so it was so weird and so many lessons and so many confrontations with aspects of myself and my psyche that really hard to process, to be honest. And like, as you can probably tell, because I'm all over the place in this episode, I'm still like processing it a lot. Like, I'm sorry if it feels like I'm trauma dumping on you. I kind of am a little bit. But I really wanted to detail the extremities of this kind of relationship dynamic and how our unconscious can show up inside of the experiences that we're having with other people and how other people can mirror aspects of ourselves that we are completely unconscious to. And the thing with having aspects of self that we are unconscious to is that they're still there. And a lot of the time, even though we're not aware of it, they are running the show. They are running the show. And my example of that is that my completely unconscious fear of being rejected and alone and abandoned was completely running the show, making me exclusively get into relationships with people where I felt like I could create this power dynamic within the relationship where I felt secure that they would never leave me because I felt like they liked me way more than I liked them and that kind of manipulative way of being inside of the relationship. Definitely not unhealthy, definitely toxic in a lot of ways, but it was coming completely unconsciously. I had no idea what inside of me was contributing to that dynamic. I was just confused. I was like, why am I with this person? And then I would never get an answer to that question. Probably because I never gave myself a real opportunity to answer the question. Um, because my unconscious was like, we don't need to look at this. Just keep doing your thing, girl. And I was like, all right. And obviously, there became a point where I did actually slow down to ask myself the question, why am I in this relationship? And eventually started to get answers. But it's so fascinating to me how we can be inside of these relationship patterns and dynamics that we consciously say we don't like. Like, I was in this experience thinking, man, I wish I could just be in a relationship with someone I actually liked. Or I wish I could feel in love and attracted to someone and like be giddy and excited for them to like pick me up and feel like nervous and like, have those like cute little butterflies. Like, I want to have that. I don't have that with any of the people that I've ever been in a relationship with. And that's what I was thinking consciously, but there were aspects of my psyche that were unconscious that were saying, "Oh no, girl, you don't want that. Mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. No, absolutely not. That is the worst possible thing that could ever happen to you if you end up finding a relationship where you feel that way with them, where you feel excited and giddy and nervous and in love and all of that, then you are going to be vulnerable. And we can't have that. We can't have you being excited and falling for someone who could end up realizing that they don't want to be with you. And so you have to only get with people that like you so much and are terrified of losing you so that they'll never leave. And you're always the one in control. It's so messed up, but it makes so much sense when I really start to dissect my childhood, my experiences, and then the ways in which I essentially had to learn to avoid the pain of abandonment, rejection, and loneliness because I didn't have the tools, the resources, the awareness, or the emotional, mental, and physical support that I needed to be able to process those feelings when I was younger. Because when I was going through so much rejection, loneliness, abandonment as a child, I didn't know what to do with those feelings. Those were hard feelings. The feeling of shame, of unworthiness, of not being good enough. It's like, what do you do with those feelings? Like, no, there's not a class on how to feel unworthy, how to like process your shame. They're not teaching us that in middle school or elementary school. And so I had to adapt and learn how to deal with those feelings the best way that I could. And turns out the best way I figured out how to deal with those feelings was to shove them really, really, really far back, way back into the deepest, darkest depths of my unconscious mind, and then avoid any relationship dynamic where someone could reject and abandon me. And so When we are confronted with experiences with people and we are I like to make this distinction between, like, when you judge a quality in someone or a quality that someone can possess, when you're triggered by it, that is almost always a sign of a unconscious negative projection. And I'm going to get into more about what an unconscious negative projection is, and we're going to walk through a little bit of a process together. If you would like to have some real life hand holding experience of this process that I have used time and time and time and time and time again to be able to come to the awareness and confront the things that I needed to confront to be able to sit here today and tell you about the experiences that I've had inside of my relationships and how much it's taught me and how much I've grown. And so this process of negative projections is so valuable. It is probably the number one thing I think I've ever used inside of my own personal development work. I also use it a lot with clients, and I use it frequently. I use it every week, pretty much, because it is always available to help you use your experiences that you're having with the people around you to wake up, to become more self aware, to confront the parts of yourself that were unconscious, the parts of yourself that you had rejected, and then integrate those back in so that you can feel more whole, so that you can feel more regulated, and so that you can be in more conscious collaboration with life rather than feeling like you're constantly trying to fight against all of these things that are making you a victim inside of life. And I highly recommend that. To be honest, I highly recommend doing what you can to move away from constantly feeling like you're needing to fight against everything in life that's making you a victim, to being more in conscious collaboration with life and allowing it to show you what you have yet to fully own and accept and heal and integrate into your life experience. Because when you are integrating all aspects of you and learning to find acceptance of all of it, of your entire life experience, wow, does life become better. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I live there 100% of the time because, oh boy, do I not. But I live there a whole lot more than I would if it wasn't for these tools. And negative projections is my favorite. So, negative projections, let me just give a little bit of context for what this is. So, again, if you are judging a quality in someone or judging someone for something, for being a certain way, if you are triggered by it, like actually like you feel worked up about it, that is a sign that you are negatively projecting. And there is a difference between feeling triggered by something and just like not preferring it. So you can prefer that people tell the truth. Okay. That'd be nice if everyone told the truth, right? You can prefer that people are honest with you. But if you get really worked up when someone lies or when you suspect that someone isn't telling you everything, then that's telling you something, girl. That's that's not just a personal preference of like, I really hope that people are honest with me and feel like they can tell me the truth. It's like, this person's lying, or this person isn't telling me everything. This person is hiding something. Oh my God. And like you keep thinking about it, and like it completely changes the way that you feel like you can be inside of that dynamic with that person. Maybe you find it really hard to be around that person now. Maybe you haven't seen that person since like earlier this morning, but you're still thinking about them. You're like coming up with ways that you can tell other people in your life that this person might be lying to you. Like, if it's really getting to you, I encourage you to just play with the possibility that this doesn't just have to do with this other person, but what this is bringing up inside of you is an aspect of yourself that you are rejecting. and that you are completely unaware of. And that's what a negative projection is. Because we all have aspects of ourself that we have learned are unacceptable from the outside world that make us unlovable or unacceptable or that we don't belong, that get people angry at us, that prevent us from getting our needs met. And so, as we're going through life and we're recognizing these aspects of self that are not okay, we reject them. We say, this part of me, this quality inside of me is not okay. So, bye. I'm going to reject this. I'm not going to let myself be this way anymore. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that when you reject a part of yourself, it doesn't go away. Shocker. It doesn't go away. It just becomes unconscious. And when an aspect of yourself is unconscious, you need to see it outside of you. You need to project it into the outside world in order to see it, in order to recognize it. And that is when we get this like triggered feeling when we are seeing a quality in ourselves or an aspect of ourselves that we have made wrong and not allowed to be there in somebody else. And so, to weave in my story from earlier into this experience, there was this tremendous judgment that I had on people who were lonely, who felt lonely, that really struggled to be alone. And it was to the point where when my dad suggested that I might be one of those people, I was like, excuse yourself, Dad. How dare you say something so outrageously rude to me? That is insane. I am not one of those people. I am not one of those pathetic losers who can't be by themselves and are lonely. Get the fuck out of here, Dad. That is not me. Sorry, Dad. Sorry if you're listening to this. Just so you know, it wasn't you, it was me. All right. Um, I was triggered. Okay. It wasn't just one of those things where it was like, I prefer if my dad would stay out of my business. It wasn't one of those things. It was like, Dad, get out of here with that shit. Like, don't even say the word lonely in my vicinity. I will vomit on you if you say that word. I was hashtag triggered, to say the least. All right. And the reason why it was so triggering to me was because it was kind of true. But I didn't know that, right? I was in the awareness of the consciousness that there was no part of me that was lonely and that I didn't even know what it was like to feel lonely. I genuinely thought that. I believed that with every part of my soul. I remember being like, I don't even know what it's like to be lonely. What it's like to be lonely. And the truth was that I had felt really lonely and disconnected for a lot of my earlier life. And because that experience was so hard to process, and it also came with some experiences that taught me that expressing that I feel lonely and expressing that I feel insecure or not good enough came with even more pain. Because when I maybe shared with someone that I was feeling lonely or left out, I became an attention seeker, or I was an attention whore, or I was playing the victim, or like, I wanted everyone to feel bad for me, or like, blah, 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 blah. Like, it was used against me in a way where it was like, okay. It's not okay for me to feel lonely. It's not okay for people to know that I feel discluded and not connected and like I don't fit in. Because if people know that I'm feeling that way, then that reflects poorly on me and it's gonna make them judge me even more. Then I'm gonna feel even more lonely and more rejected and more not good enough. And it's just not a good time. So I need to reject this part of me, complete push it completely out of my consciousness so that I can embody the persona of someone who loves being alone. Doesn't need nobody. I don't need no man. I don't need nobody. I don't even want to be with you because I love myself and I love my time so much. So I am alone not because you don't want to be with me, but because I don't want to be with you, girl. Because I don't want to be with none of y'all because I am so much cooler than all of you and I would rather be in my own company than be with the drama and the shit that's going on with you guys. So that was my way of taking control over a dynamic that once felt really painful by really attaching myself to the story that that was my preference, that that was what I wanted. And so this overly triggered, like, "Oh my god, how dare you say this to me?" And, "Oh my god, those people are pathetic who can't be alone and bounce from relationship to relationship and, like, can't even, like, take a weekend to, like, hang out with themselves and, like, go to lunch with themselves." Pathetic. Pathetic. That whole dynamic, that whole experience was deep down coming from my own rejection of the part of me that felt lonely because I learned that it wasn't okay for me to feel that way. And so I think that negative projections are the most powerful work that we can do because the thing is, me being completely unaware of the fact that I was terrified of being alone was only perpetuating relationship dynamics that were unfulfilling and toxic and one-sided and not really allowing me to connect. Like I was alone. I was alone for a lot of my life, very isolated, and I really felt like I was okay with it. Like genuinely, totally convinced myself I was okay with it. But I can say now, you know, still only being 27 and absolutely not being an expert in any of this, but what I can tell you is that having a life now where I let people in and I prioritize my time with other people just as much, if not maybe sometimes slightly more than I prioritize my alone time. It just is nicer. It's so much more fulfilling. It's so much more passionate and exciting and just like it doesn't feel like I'm just going through the motions of life anymore, like, which is what it kind of felt like all those years when I was just like spending all my time with myself. And so there's so much value in waking up to the parts of ourselves that we've rejected because when we're rejecting parts of ourselves, we're never going to feel whole. We're never going to be integrated. And it took me recognizing that there was an aspect of myself that I was at one point completely unaware was there. And then learning how to accept that part of me, which is a whole other thing. But here's the thing, my judgment on other people for being lonely was my judgment on myself being lonely. And the only reason why I judged myself for being lonely was because of 2 things. One, it was too painful to feel lonely when I was younger. I didn't know how to process it, I didn't have the support. And the support that I did seek out, second of all, was not good support and just made me kind of feel bad for feeling that way and kinda gaslit me a little bit and just taught me that, like, me feeling that way was gonna result in people not liking me even more than they already did, and so that was what led to my judgment of my loneliness, but the thing is, this part of me that is lonely and that is afraid of being alone is so understandable. Like, hello, we're humans. Part of this human existence is being in community, is connection, is fostering relationship. Like, our survival at one point in humanity, well, even now still, but like obviously throughout the entirety of humanity relied on other people. And as much as today's society loves to really push the narrative that like we can be a lone sorry, a lone wolf and do it all ourselves and no one's gonna be there for you the way that you can be there for yourself and you gotta hustle and you gotta like, you know, you know, reject the naysayers and don't listen to anybody and just put your head down and do it and you can be successful on your own. Like that whole narrative, can you tell I'm like fighting back my own vomit as I'm saying it? Um, we love to hear that in society. And there might be like little tiny aspects of that that can be helpful in certain situations. But the reality is, we are creatures of connection. And the fear of being alone and being lonely is so valid. It's so understandable. And it's not wrong or doesn't make you pathetic or a bad person because you don't want to be alone, because you want to have reliable people in your life. And I had to really do work around that because I had made it so wrong for so long to feel lonely or be afraid of loneliness. And so I think that recognizing where you are judging a quality in someone else and therefore are judging a quality in you is the absolute first but most necessary step in allowing you to integrate it because through awareness, you can start to question your judgment of it. Start to question, was that really wrong? Or is it wrong that I am this way? And learning how to have compassion for yourself and others, but really targeting that compassion back to the parts of you that you had made wrong and unacceptable is what allows you to integrate those parts back into you so that they're not unconsciously running the show in the background, pulling the strings of your life and making you get into really awful relationships and wonder why the heck do I keep doing this or whatever it's doing for you. It could do a lot of different things, but it's also when it's integrated, it's also not going to be like at the forefront of your life either. Because let me tell you, through me, realizing that there is this really deep, deep part of me that's so terrified of being alone. I'm not out here all the time like, oh my God, you didn't text me back and it's been an hour and do you hate me? Like that, that's not how I'm living my life now because it's integrating. It's not like unconscious and it's not like at the forefront. It's not everything. It's just like an aspect of me that's allowed to be there and that might get triggered sometimes, but then that's an opportunity for me to like work with it and to maybe seek support to help someone else help me work through it if that's available. But if it's not, then like knowing how to regulate and self-regulate is a really valuable tool as well. Co-regulation, self-regulation, both really valuable things that I'm realizing we should be able to do both. It shouldn't just be one or the other. There's not one extreme of like, I need someone all the time in order to be okay. And if I'm by myself and I'm working through something, I will not be okay. But it's also not like if I'm working through something, nobody look at me, nobody talk to me, nobody even think about me. I need to do this all by myself and just I know don't look at me when I'm like this. Like I need to work through this by myself. And then once I'm perfect, I will come and I'll get you. Like that's kind of the extremes that we feed into a lot of the time, but it doesn't have to be that way. Self-regulation, co-regulation, beautiful harmony that I think that we can all strive for a little bit more of in our lives, either leaning a little bit more towards one or leaning more towards the other. We can work to balance both of them. So, what I really want to encourage you to do with all of this information around projections is to look for and choose one quality in somebody in your life that really triggers you. Whether it's somebody who you see that they're a bit selfish, or you think that they talk too much, or you think that they're too insecure, or like you judge that they never want to be alone and they're hopping from relationship to relationship, or maybe it's somebody who is shy or someone that's really loud. Maybe you judge someone as like really arrogant, or you judge someone as really insecure. Maybe there's a recent person that you can think of where you just kind of felt like, ooh, like a little bit triggered by them, and kept thinking about it and felt like your dynamic with them was inevitably changed in the way that you related to them was tainted because of this quality in them that you had a really hard time accepting. Um, so take that quality. And if you need to pause this, do it just to think of someone and a quality in them that you don't like. And I want you to form that quality into a judgment, like a statement, like just to get really clear. It's like, I don't like this, that this person is selfish, or this person is really arrogant, or this person should stop lying. Like, whatever it is, I want you to just really clearly fit it into a statement that's kind of judgmental, that's making a stark judgment on someone. Pause if you need to. And then I want you to take that statement and flip it around so that you're saying it about yourself. So I'm judgment. I'm sorry, I'm selfish, or I don't like me because I'm jealous, or I don't like me because I'm selfish, or I talk too much, or I should be more honest, or I shouldn't lie so much, or whatever. Take the exact same statement and judgment that you made about them and make it about yourself. And I want you to try it on. I like to say, pretend we're going to Foot Locker and we're just trying on some shoes. We're just trying on shoes and we're seeing, where do they fit? How do they fit? What's it feel like to walk around in these shoes for a little bit? And you don't have to buy the shoes, but I want you to just really give them a good trial and try it on. Close your eyes and really feel into that statement about yourself. And notice what you see. You can have a few different experiences of this. If you're trying on a statement like, I'm selfish, maybe when you close your eyes, all you see is yourself constantly people pleasing and giving up yourself and what you want and what you need for what other people want and need instead. And if that's what you see, be open to that. Be open to whether you see direct reflection of your statement or you see direct opposition to your statement, because both are valuable insight. Just notice what you see. Where does this feel relevant? And just trace those memories back in time. Maybe to the first time that you remember feeling this way or learning this about yourself. Maybe you have an experience of someone else judging you for this. Someone else seeing the same quality in you that you were seeing in this person, and then you feel judged by them or rejected or hurt or ashamed or embarrassed. And if you're in the experience of seeing only the opposite of your statement, I want you to expand into this idea that the reason why you're so extremely opposite to this quality that you see in the other person is because you haven't allowed yourself to embody that quality. If you judge people as selfish because you are so extremely selfless and give everything for everyone else, it's because you have a relationship with your own needs and your own desires where they're not okay, where it's not okay for you to honor them. And if you did honor them, you would judge yourself. You would feel like you're wrong for doing that. And maybe there's a reason why. Maybe there are memories and experiences that taught you that it wasn't okay to honor what you wanted and what you needed. And that's why you've created a whole life for yourself, a whole pattern of being selfless. It's because you've rejected any selfishness that could have ever existed in you because you found out it wasn't okay. And if you need to pause this and write down any insights or any memories or things that feel relevant that you would like to just make a note of, please do so. And then I want to move and finish with this process from the University of Santa Monica called compassionate self forgiveness. And this is where we are going to take this quality that we have judged in someone else and therefore have judged in ourselves, and we're going to start to make it okay. We're going to start to bring acceptance to this part of ourselves so that it's no longer being rejected and shoved into the unconscious and pulling the strings of our lives behind the scenes, so that it can actually integrate and be a part of this human experience that we can lean on when it's helpful and we can steer away from or use different tools to move away from when it's not helpful. And so we're going to fill in the blanks to this statement. I forgive myself I forgive myself for judging myself as or for blank. The truth is blank. And I want you to do at least one round, but I promise the more of these statements that you fill out, the more powerful and the more integrative this experience is going to be. That's actually going to change the way that you relate to the people in your life and the way that you show up inside of your life, because you're no longer showing up from this unconscious part of you that hasn't been allowed. And so it can sound like, I forgive myself for judging myself as selfish. The truth is, sometimes I am just focused on my experience of life because I'm living it through my perspective, through my body, through my senses. And when life gets really hard or when life gets really exciting and there are these really, really strong emotions, it's really easy to forget that other people are having their own really intense experience of life and living it through their own perspective. And sometimes that awareness level of living life more exclusively through my excitement or my despair causes me to make decisions that are very self centered. And that's understandable. It's just a part of living in one human body, in one human existence. And everyone is going to have that experience sometimes. And although there is room to sometimes be more empathetic and compassionate and to see things through other people's perspectives and be able to make a more informed decision from that place, I'm not a bad person and I'm not wrong for making decisions from exclusively my human experience and my perspective because that's the only one that I have direct access to. I have to actually try to think about life through other people's perspectives. It doesn't come organic necessarily because I'm not directly connected to other people's brains, thought patterns, belief systems, senses, as much as I am to mine. That was a big one. Maybe you can tell that I did this very recently. And so take that quality about yourself and then find out what's true. What's true about this quality that makes it understandable, that makes it okay, that makes it worthy of forgiveness? Because the more that you can forgive a part of yourself, I promise you, it's not going to take over. Forgiving yourself for being selfish isn't going to make you more selfish. Let me tell you, rejecting that you're selfish is probably the best way to be selfish because it's going to leak out in all these unconscious ways. And my rejection of being lonely sure made me lonely. I didn't realize I was lonely, but I was certainly isolated. And so this is such a powerful process. And I hope that my story leading up into this process helped you really resonate with the value that it has to offer you. And I'm excited for you to try this on and to stay open to more opportunities to recognize where you're judging yourself via where you're judging someone else and use it as an opportunity to integrate parts of yourself that you've rejected so that you can feel more whole and more integrated and more in conscious evolution and involvement with life rather than fighting against it constantly. Which, like I said, is a good place to be. Thank you so much for tuning into this solo episode. I had a lot of fun with this, and I hope you enjoyed it too, because maybe you can tell I really didn't plan it. I kind of just went off the cuff, which I love doing, but I feel pressure to not do that sometimes, especially when it's a solo episode. And so I really just leaned into it, was a bit vulnerable and exposed myself in some ways. And I hope that I did that in a way that felt valuable to you. And if you liked this episode and you would like to share some thoughts, feel free to comment on it on YouTube or reach out to me on Instagram. All the links to everything are always in the show notes. And I look forward to connecting with you in our next episode.